Hello, world, and welcome to another episode of the Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua the Genius, along here with my beautiful co-host, Sarah and Mitchell. And today we're going to be talking about the digital citizen, right? Transitioning from being a passive digital citizen to an active digital citizen, okay? And we're going to start with basically why is this important? Why is the transition from being a passive to an active digital citizen important? And I guess I just want to start the conversation with kind of where our current landscape is with technology and how it's affecting our life. With the pandemic, with COVID-19, we've really seen a drastic change in how we're utilizing technology in our everyday life and how that's kind of forming a new way of us interacting with our society. Right? If we look at the retail industry, right, more people are using their cell phones to order products, right, through Amazon or through Walmart. If we look at finance, right, people are transitioning from using paper money to using apps like Cash App, or even further using mediums of currency like cryptocurrency, right? If we look at the transportation industry, right, more people are using Ubers or are utilizing their phones for ride sharing, right? So we've seen how technology is consistently changing how we are interacting in society, and that has only increased tremendously because of COVID, right? Even one more, if we look at the work environment, we have so many more people working from home, students learning from home, than them going into classrooms or everyday workers going into work buildings, right? They're working from home, so they're utilizing their personal devices more. You're utilizing your phones and computers for Zoom calls, right, or for Google Hangouts, right? Kids are using Microsoft Teams.
They're using Teams, or they might be using something like Schoology, different learning platforms, Blackboard.
Definitely. And then even speaking about students, I talk to a lot of my students, a lot of the interns that I deal with, and the interaction between teenagers hasn't even changed, right? The majority of their social interaction happens through Snapchat, happens through Instagram, happens through Facebook.
Through an interface. There's no more of that face-to-face
personal
contact.
Mm-hmm. And so we can see how technology has integrated itself into our lives, right? And so, in 2021, we need to be more aware of how our technology is being used in our everyday lives and what data is collecting on us, and how we can safeguard ourselves against malicious attackers, right? You need to be aware that any piece of technology that you are using, there is the potential for somebody to see an exploit in it, or see an opportunity to take advantage, misuse. Right? And so we talk about hackers thriving off the ignorance of the user, or the lack of knowledge of the user.
Lack of know-how.
Right? The
lack of accountability over your private data, your personal information.
Mm-hmm. And so that ignorance, right, then turns into fear, because you not knowing about certain aspects of technology, these hackers are able to use that as an opportunity to make you make decisions underneath stress, right? And I want to go through some of the common ways or common techniques that hackers are using currently to try to gain access to your personal information, right? One of them is going to be, I'm sure that all of you guys have received an email from someone or somebody that you don't know who they are, but they're either requesting information from you, or they're saying, hey, you earned this really cool reward. We want you to send over your bank account information, or send over some personal identifying information about yourself so we can send you this reward. All right.
Or what is another common, or this is what you're referring to as a phishing attempt.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
I keep seeing these Facebook groups popping up with free Amazon products,
mm-hmm.
and those are scammers who are saying that you're gonna get a free back massager or a free lamp or whatever. Nothing in this life is free. That should be a red flag. So you go and you're saying, oh, I'm gonna get a free back massager on Amazon. So you go and you put in your shipping information, you put your personal your name, your contact information, and these people have some information that they can start building a profile on you, and they just have to fill in the other gaps. Now they have your email address, and they can start trying to access your email address to get access to your other accounts. So just be very cautious when you get an email address from someone you don't recognize, or an email address that is claiming that your social security account has been compromised, and you have to enter your social to validate. Like, all of these things are fraudulent. Don't fall for it.
And a couple other ones, right? So we talk about, some people getting text messages or spam calls, right? I know I've received a lot of calls from the Marriott saying, hey, I won 3 days at the Marriott Suites, and it's redeemable at any location. And further into the call, they're requesting very personal information about myself. Hey, send over your social security number so we can verify who you are. No, I'm not giving you my social security number, right? For people that you can't identify who they are, right? You'll see also text messages. There's
about Amazon packages. I always get these random texts. Your Amazon package is ready for pickup. Amazon does not text you from some random number about any packages. Do not click on these links that you get in these random text messages.
Or even Google, right? You'll have fake accounts that will say, hey, your Google account has been compromised. Send over your last password, right? Google has specified in their platform that they will never ask you for personal information through text or through phone. But there'll be third-party companies that will use this as an opportunity to people that may not know that, to say, hey, we're from Google, and we're saying that your account has been compromised. Send over your last known password so we can verify who you are. And immediately when you send over that password, they have access to your email, and now they have access to your personal information, right? So you want to watch out for those things. Also, as an entrepreneur, I get some text messages and calls to say, hey, we can get you a credit line of $250,000. Send over your social security number because you're pre-approved, and we can go ahead and get you the money in your account in 24 hours. Those things you also want to look out for, right? Any of these, what we call phishing attempts, right? The attempt to try to get information out of the user. These hackers are using multiple channels to do that based upon your ignorance, right?
So I have a question, since you brought up the perspective of a private company, because a phishing attempt is usually the beginning of what could be a ransomware attack, no? So just to kind of tie this into some current events, ransomware attacks have been increasing exponentially since the pandemic has begun.
And they are the number one attack right now out in the market.
Correct. So, just a couple examples of some high-profile ransomware attacks that have taken place.
You want to explain what ransomware is first before you go into
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So, it starts with a phishing attempt. So, one of your employees gets an email saying that they need to log in to verify something. So, they go ahead and they log in, and now the hacker has one employee's login information to the system. So, they can then use that to... what would they do? They would
gain access to the official database.
Okay.
Right, they would gain access to that database, and if they can get access to the file structure. So most of the time, they ransom private information, whether it be some financial documents, whether it be operation documents that you need for the company to run on a day-to-day basis. They basically get into the computer's mainframe, the main computer server that has the original copy of that information, and they basically encrypt it, right? They put an encryption key on it to where they are the only ones
who can access that data.
Exactly, that can put in that key, right? So if you're a company and you get attacked this way, and they get access to, let's say, a document file that has your past 10 years client list or tax records or what have you, and you need that to operate the next day, right? And you're a multi-million-dollar company.
Cripples your
how much money do you stand to lose to not have by not having access to these documents, right? And so these ransomware attacks are basically utilizing encryption, right, to inhibit the company's from getting access to this, and they're saying, hey, we want $1 million. We want $2 million.
That's the ransom
We want
part.
$5 million, right? And these companies are paying it, right? Because there's no other way. Once a folder has been encrypted, and the way that encryption currently works, once it's been encrypted, the only way to open up that file is by the encryption key.
The ransom, yeah.
Right? The only way is to utilize that encryption key. And so if you're a multi-million-dollar company, you have your back up against the wall. Either you start again from scratch, or you pay the ransomware. And the hard part is that it's difficult to figure out where the phishing attempt first started
from,
and how to seal it up. So let's say you pay $1 million in January to free up your server, and that same attacker uses the same exploit and locks up another file in June.
One.
Right? So 6 months later, you're back to square one because your cybersecurity team, may not have the know-how to protect your information. Right? What else were you saying about ransomware?
So I was just pointing out some examples of high-profile ransomware attacks that have been happening recently.
Mm-hmm.
So one would be the Colonial Pipeline. So these groups are targeting they're targeting hospitals, they're targeting police stations, like as far as the public sector is concerned. But in the private sector, they're targeting energy companies. So the Colonial Pipeline is an oil company. And then the other one was JBS. This is a meat packing company.
Mm-hmm.
So we may potentially see some meat shortages as a result. Now we're talking about the implications of some of these attacks, restricting the flow of oil throughout the company throughout the country as far as the Colonial Pipeline is concerned, or restricting our access to meats in our nation,
Mm-hmm. Just a side note, that's a crazy name for a pipeline, the Colonial Pipeline.
Isn't it?
Okay, let's move on. So those are some notable ransomware attacks that have occurred in there, and they're going to continue to increase.
Yeah,
right?
President Biden actually sent out a letter to private companies, just kind of like en masse, stating that they need to step up their cybersecurity to try to thwart these ransomware attacks. So what are some things that, even if you're not a private company, let's say you're a local school district, because these hackers attack our agencies here in the Virgin Islands.
Mm-hmm.
I was working at a government agency when there was a ransomware attack, and our whole website, all the content on our website got locked up, and we just had to start over because they were not paying that ransom.
So you guys opted to start over.
Correct.
Instead of pay. I understand.
Correct. It was trash.
I remember WAPA was attacked. I think this was last year or the year before last, right?
Yeah, and they got access to anybody who was paying
via credit card
online on the website, because they had another company that they were doing, I guess, the e-commerce payment through. That company was the one that was attacked. And that's how it wasn't WAPA directly. It was a company that they contracted in to do that payment portion for the bills. Yeah,
I understand. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's basically what this conversation is about thwarting the attacks that are actively being placed upon you, right? So we see it in the corporate arena, and we see ransomware attacks being very, very high in that arena. In the public sector, right, we see the phishing attempts, we see the email scams, we see a couple other ones where you go to fake websites, right? There are website designers who are very good, and they'll make an identical website to a popular website and just change one letter. So let's just say it's an Apple website. Instead of using 2 P's, they use 3 P's, right? And so if you go to this website, it may look like you're buying Apple products. And immediately when you put in your credit card information, that website developer now has your credit card information, or has your location data, or has any personal information that you're putting into that website. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So in the case of websites, how can somebody better identify a website that's not legit if that makes sense. What are some things that I can look out for as a user?
And so we'll dive more into that in our ways to fight against this. But one of those ways is being able to identify a secure website, right? And the way that you can identify between a non-secure and secure website is by looking at the URL, right? That's the
the search box.
That's the bar that you type in the web address. Once you click enter, there will be a lock, right? A little lock icon that will identify to you that it's a secure website. You can also look at the front part of the URL. It should say HTTPS, right?
That S stands for secure.
And that S stands for secure, right? And the website developer has to put that feature in the website, right, in order for that feature to occur. Now, some websites don't have it, and some websites don't need it. Websites that you're just viewing content, right? You're just viewing and browsing, that you're not inputting any data. That website might not necessarily need the secure socket layer, right? It might not need that extra layer of encryption. But when you're talking about websites such as let's just
e-commerce, anything that uses
any
e-commerce,
commerce that you're putting in your personal information, your name, your date of birth, your credit card information, your physical home location, if you're putting in that information into a non-secure website, that information is going in as plain text, right? And if it's plain text, that means as the website developer, when I go and look at logs and I go and look at my actual infrastructure of my website, I can see all of that information that you put in plainly. You can see your entire credit card number. I can see the CVV number. I can see the expiration date, and I can see the associated personal information such as your full name, date of birth, and the associated billing address. So I can then use that now information to spoof your identity to either go purchase some other assets or do some more nefarious things with your identity, right? Before we get back to that, I just want to talk about some of the other ways that hackers can attack you. I know a lot of you guys might be utilizing public Wi-Fi, right? Especially in the pandemic.
Yeah.
You may not. You may have a lot of people at the house, or you may need to go to a coffee shop because you don't have Wi-Fi at the house.
Or you're just in the park and you want to use a public Wi-Fi.
Right. So the way that hackers, right, are able to compromise your data over public Wi-Fi, okay, over public Wi-Fi, anytime that you connect to the internet and you want to access information through the internet, you're sending and receiving data, right, from that website into that website, right? There are people who are able to sit and utilize that same network, and while you're sending out that information, they can pull it right out of the air and put it into their computer. So if you're accessing a website and you're putting in your credit card information over a non-secure website and non-secure public Wi-Fi link, hackers can sit there in that same coffee shop with their computer and just pull out information as you're trying to send it. And you'll never see it because they're accessing the public Wi-Fi network as opposed to accessing your computer directly. Okay, so there's multiple ways that hackers can attack you in various ways, and so what this conversation is about is making you aware of some of those things, and then giving you some tools that you can utilize today to be able to help safeguard your digital profile.
Be
right?
More accountable and more active, rather, as a digital citizen.
Yes.
Less passive.
Yes, and accountability is really big here. It's really big here. We're not in the early 90s where we where we have to give so much trust to these big behemoth technology companies to do good with our data, right? There's been a big push with privacy and privacy transparency, right? That in the Apple platform, when I started developing that was in 2014, it wasn't necessary for developers to put a privacy policy as an attachment to their application. It wasn't required.
It wasn't a thing.
It is now required. You have to have a privacy policy with your application. You have to tell users what information you're requesting and how you're using that information.
And how it's being stored, no?
And how it's being stored. And so
and for
now,
how long?
Yes. And as a user, now you have the information in front of you to make an educated decision if you want to utilize this service or not utilize this service. So the onus, right, the responsibility is falling now back on the user, because these companies are now being pressed to be more transparent with how they're utilizing your information. So now with that transparency comes more accountability on your part, right? Becoming more aware and more knowledgeable of what's happening with your data as you're using your devices, right? These devices, these computers, these cell phones, smartphones aren't going anywhere anytime soon. You're only going to get more and more devices in your house and in your work environment that are going to attach to the internet. So you need to learn how to protect yourself.
Absolutely, because there are refrigerators that connect to the internet that create, like grocery lists and can do the shopping for you.
Clocks. There's shoes that connect to the internet now, right? There's gloves that connect to the internet, jeans, jackets, sofas. There's so many things that are going to be
They're being integrated with technology.
We call that the Internet of Things, or ITO, the Internet of Things, right? And that Internet of Things is all these things out in the universe that connect to the internet, right? And so we have about 5 tips that we've constructed here that I think would be very, very beneficial to you as a technology user that you can implement right now to to really safeguard yourself as you're browsing the internet and sending and receiving messages over the internet, right? And so the first one, we talk about passcodes and passwords, right? Passcodes and passwords. So most mobile devices today have the option to put a passcode to secure the information inside of your phone, right? So just like a bank PIN code for your debit card, you have a PIN code for your smartphones and your smart devices that allow you access, right, into the device. Now, most of them come standard with a 4-digit passcode. The 4-digit passcode. I would recommend, right, and I would say it would be in your best interest to increase that to a 6-digit passcode. And I know that most smartphones and most smart devices have the ability to increase that 4-digit passcode to a 6-digit passcode. Okay.
Yeah,
the reason
you can even do an alphanumeric passcode if
and
you
that's
don't
the
want.
passcode. We'll get to that in just a minute. Yeah. So the passcode, the difference between the two, right? And if I'm a hacker, right? If I'm a hacker and I have your phone, and I'm trying to input that passcode, we have there's a method called brute force, and brute force is basically trying every combination, all possible options until I get the right one. Okay, so I'm just sitting there trying 1111. All right, doesn't work. 1112 doesn't work. 1113 doesn't work. Right. So if I'm attempting that, with a 4-digit passcode, there's 10,000 possibilities that I have available to me before I get your passcode right. 10,000 tries before I get your passcode, or within 10,000,
you're gonna sync that.
I can get your passcode. Now, if I increase that to 6 digits, just add 2 more digits, that number changes from 10,000 to 1 million.
Possible combinations.
Right? 10,000 to 1 million. So if I have a 4-digit passcode, a hacker has the possibility of 10,000 combinations to get your passcode right, right? If you have 6 digits, that turns into 1 million. So that gives the hacker much more work, and it's a longer amount of time before they get your passcode right. And with iPhones, with any devices that run iOS, right? So that's iPads as well. There's a fail-safe, right? So brute force is not a possibility on iPhones or iOS devices, because if you attempt to put in the passcode too many times,
I think it's more than 10 times.
It's more than 10.
Yeah.
If you try to do it more than 10 and you get it wrong, the phone is just going to lock itself up.
Disabled.
Yep. And the only way to gain access back to the device to use it is to wipe and restore the entire phone, erase all the data in the operating system out of the phone, and then reinstall the operating system fresh, which erases all of your data, right? So that's the fail-safe on the iOS platform. But it's still very, very good if you're using a 4-digit, I would recommend increasing that to a 6-digit passcode, because it increases that number of possibilities for the hacker to get that right from 10,000 to 1 million. And then Sarah also brought up, if you don't want to use a passcode, if you want to, increase the security layer even more, you can use a password, an alphanumeric password, right? And to make that secure, we categorize that between being weak passwords or strong passwords. Okay, strong passwords, right? The criteria for strong passwords is that the password has to be at least 8 characters. At least 8 characters, has to have one uppercase letter, at least one lowercase letter, and has to have a special symbol, right? Something that's not
like an exclamation point,
that's
or
not
a
a number
hashtag
or a
like
letter,
that.
something that's a special symbol, right? And if it falls within those guidelines, then it's a strong password. Okay, so I would recommend that if you don't use a passcode, right, that's 6-digit passcode, I would then recommend utilizing the password, a strong password that has 8 characters, 1 capital letter, at least 1 lowercase letter, and uses 1 special character. Okay. Also, with smart devices, there is now biometric security layers. Okay, and I put quotations around biometric because
they're not technically like a bioscan,
correct.
Which is why the police can't force you to open your devices.
So that part is still the gray area. I'll put a tack in that. I want to come right back to that, but I want to talk about Face ID and Touch ID real quick, right? Face ID and Touch ID are very, very cool innovations when it comes to
security.
Encryption and security. Yes, with Touch ID allows, I believe it's 1 in 50,000, right? So if you were to give your phone to 50,000 people, right, that would be the number before somebody was able to get your
before they find your doppelganger.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's 1 in 50,000, right? Before somebody gets it right. With Face ID, that increases to 1 million. So 1 out of 1 million people have the possibility to be able to access,
similar enough to you that
and gain access into your iPhone, right?
To be your twin.
A lot of people don't like Touch ID and Face ID because they believe that it's retaining biometric data, and that's not the case.
It's adding their face scan to a database that's being used for mass surveillance. I think that's typically the fear.
Yeah,
my fingerprints going into a database.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And while I see why they would think so, right? That's not the case, and this is why. So the Touch ID and Face ID go through an algorithm and go through a process through the secure enclave. Okay, and the secure enclave is a special reservation area within iOS-based chipsets. So that's iPhones and iPads, iPod Touches, right? And some Mac computers, right? There's a secure enclave that processes that information. So when you first set up Touch ID or Face ID, it's basically doing a scan, and within that scan, it is tracing a mathematical equation along that model, right? So it's basically taking your thumbprint and making a mathematical representation. It's taking your face data and making a mathematical representation, and then saving that mathematical model in the secure enclave. When you go to access, right, to unlock your phone or buy an app utilizing Touch ID or Face ID, that app then references that same model inside of that phone. That mathematical model that's stored in the secure enclave is never sent out to Apple. It's locally stored inside of your phone. It is not accessible to any other third-party apps, and there is no way for it to be shared with any third-party databases.
That's comforting.
And even if it is compromised, there is no way to reverse engineer that mathematical equation back into a representation of your face.
Because it's just numbers.
Because it's just numbers, right? They can't take that equation and then recreate your face again. That's not how it works, right? It's not true biometrics, right? But it's
fancy math.
Basically, right? And so they're using that fancy math to create a really cool and easy, user-friendly security layer and very, very secure security layer. So I would behoove you to utilize Touch ID or Face ID on your Apple products, because it just gives you another layer of security. These things you can look up. We're going to add the link down in the notes for the actual support article that talks about the secure enclave, so you can read this actually from an Apple support document and be able to get that information. Okay. Anything else on passcode, Sarah, before I move on?
Would you encourage people to use what I would call a passphrase as opposed to a password, just so it's a longer string of characters as opposed to maybe like 8 to 12?
So the concept of passphrase is kind of it's similar to a password, but it's
just longer. It's a phrase.
It's
as opposed
longer.
To just being like Apple 1 2 3.
Uh-huh.
It could be like Jimmy climbed the apple tree 1 2 3. You just get more characters.
You get more characters, and
would that equal more protection, or it just kind of depends on how you're substituting numbers for letters and mixing it up as opposed to just using like a long string of letters?
Passwords and passphrase are commonly used interchangeably. The difference between the two is just like you said, that the length of it, and it actually being a human readable word, right? Something that we can read as a passphrase. Passphrase Apple, Johnny Appleseed. Okay, that's an entire string, but we can identify that is actual words that we can read. It's humanly readable, as opposed to a password might not be humanly readable because it's mixed with different characters and there's so many combinations. Yep. So while passphrases are easier for the user to remember, they might not be as secure because you're not using as many combinations of letters, numbers, and special characters, right? So that's really, I would say that...
It depends on how you set it up.
It depends on how you set it up. I would recommend using a password that utilizes a strong password, and we'll get into the creation of strong passwords in tip 3. Right, and Keychain and password saving and creation, but we're going to get to two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Yep. So two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is a new technology that has, I think, been around for probably about the last 5 to 7 years, right? And so two-factor authentication is basically if you're signing into a platform, two-factor authentication wants to utilize another factor to authenticate you. So the first factor of authentication is your password. Okay. The second point would be most platforms utilize sending a code via text message or via email. Okay. So when you sign in, let's say you sign into Google. You sign into Google, you put in your email address, you put in your password, but
they
Google,
recognize this is a browser you haven't accessed to your account through before.
Correct.
So it's saying, hey, this may not be you.
Correct.
I need a second way to authenticate that this is you.
Correct. And so when you set up your Gmail account, you put in your telephone number. So that email address is associated with this telephone number. So since you set that up previously, it will send a 6-digit code to that telephone number and then ask you to input that code into the platform.
To prove that it's you.
To prove that, hey, this is an authenticated user. We need to allow them access because they're able to verify this code. So usually that's sent via text message or sent via email. Okay? That's two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication also happens through third-party applications such as Google Authenticator. Okay? Google Authenticator is a really, really cool app because it takes away the need to verify with your personal information. You don't need a telephone number or you don't need a secondary email address to utilize Google Authenticator. You can download Google Authenticator for free from the App Store. And when you sign up for a platform, the two-factor authentication security option in the account settings will have an option to say verify with Authenticator app. Okay, and Google Authenticator is one of the more commonly used ones. And so you download the Google Authenticator app. The Authenticator app scans a QR code in your account dashboard. So now that links the two. Once it scans that QR code, it links the Google Authenticator app with your platform, so that anytime you want to sign in going forward, you can go back to that Authenticator app and it will have a pre-generated code for you already sitting there. So you don't have to issue out these text messages. You don't have to issue out these email sends to get a verified code. You can go into your Google Authenticator app, see which service is asking for a code, and then input that automatically generated code into the website and keep moving forward. I use Google Authenticator app with a lot of different applications. The majority of the apps that I use with Google Authenticator is a lot of my cryptocurrency applications, right? So I utilize Google Authenticator to protect my accounts that utilize and that save a lot of my hard-earned money, right? So Google Authenticator is a great concept. Also, there's also device two-factor, right? So device two-factor is saying, hey, I signed into my Google account on my iPhone, and I signed in on my iPad at home, and I signed into my iPad at work, all with the same account, right? So Google utilizes, and Apple also utilizes this as well. I believe Facebook utilizes device sign-in as well. So it'll say, hey, we notice that you have two other devices that are also signed in with this account. We'll send you a notification to one of these
device.
Yep, to one of those other devices, and if you verify on that other device, we'll allow you to sign in to this device. Okay, so 3 ways for two-factor authentication. You can have the platform send you a code via text or email. You can use Google Authenticator, which is a third-party application, which removes the need to give the platform your personal information, like your telephone number or email address. It automatically generates that code for you. Or some platforms utilize device sign-in. So if you're signed into multiple devices, you can utilize another device to sign into the platform. Did you have anything to add to two-factor?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. You got it.
Okay, let's move on.
What's our third tip for how to be a more active digital citizen?
Yep, third is Keychain. Okay, third is Keychain.
Keychain is the most slept on feature in the phone, in the computer. Oh, it's so good.
Yep. So Keychain, the concept of the Keychain is basically your saved keys or your key ring, and the actual passwords are the keys on that keychain, right? So every time you sign into a platform and you're utilizing, you're signed into iCloud, right? You're signed into iCloud. iCloud will ask you, hey, do you want to save this password in iCloud keychain? Do you want to save your Google password? You want to save your Amazon password, so that when you go to sign in next time, we can reference.
It'll autofill for you.
Yep, we can reference that password and put it in.
But not automatically. So in order to access those passwords, you have a master key that you would have to type in.
Correct. I'm glad that you brought that up. So the master key, when you're using iCloud keychain, is your iCloud password, right? So whatever Apple ID you're using with iCloud, the password to that Apple ID is the password to gain access to your keychain. And that is synced with Touch ID and Face ID. So you can utilize Touch ID and Face ID to gain access to the entire list of passwords if you ever forget them. Okay?
Correct.
And that's used for what Sarah stated, the automatic population. When you put in your email address, it'll automatically populate that password down there for you.
You don't even have to put in your email address. Like the field will be blank,
yep.
And you'll see like a little key icon right in the corner. You can click on that, and it'll suggest like, hey, we have these saved passwords. Do you want to use one of them? And another thing I think is important with iCloud Keychain, because I think a lot of folks now are either saving all their passwords in a note on their phone, or I've seen people like create a contact for each password. So it's like if your phone is compromised, there is no layer of security to protect your passwords. All I have to do is open your note, and I have all of your passwords. at least with the keychain, there's that layer of security where there's another password, I would have to know the password to get access to your entire list of passwords.
Correct. And as we were talking about before with generating passcodes, okay? Now, a very,
sneaky keychain.
very important tip here is that when you're creating passwords, you don't want to use common passwords. Sarah, in the note there.
You want me to pull up the list of the most common passwords?
Yeah. Give me some of the most common passwords.
I've definitely seen my mom use these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's number one.
That's number one. And that's from 2021. I pulled that from 2021.
Password. That's the password. That's another one that people use a lot. 11111. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What is this? QWERTY?
QWERTY, yeah.
What is that?
It's these letters QWERTY. They're very common.
It's like
right
going 1, 2, 3, 4. That's That's the letter version of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I was like, I've never seen that before. That's new. Okay, that makes sense. And then the rest are different variations of that. So there's QWERTY 1, 2, 3. 1Q, 2W3E, but they're all like basically that. But
got you. And so we definitely, when you're creating passwords, you definitely don't want to utilize common passwords, right? Because those are the first ones that hackers will put in.
Brute force is gonna try.
They're gonna try the first common passwords.
Let's knock out the low hanging fruit.
They're highly successful at it because a lot of people utilize common passwords, right? A lot of people. Because it's easy to
remember.
Right? And so, right, a lot of us have a lot of passwords to remember, especially now with different devices, all these different platforms.
Of the year.
I have Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, what else we got? We have an Amazon account. We have a Walmart account. I have a wholesale account where I have so many different platforms that I utilize that have different passwords that it's just sometimes difficult, right? So we want to utilize something that's easy for us to remember, but I don't want my bank account password to be Apple. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, in the same breath, I would encourage people not to use one password for everything.
That was mine. Yep. So definitely.
Yeah, because if somebody gets, if I successfully figure out the one password, I can try that for all your other accounts, and now I have access to everything.
I remember I was using the same passwords maybe like 7 years ago. I was using the same password for everything. Same password for everything. Same password. But iCloud eventually sent me a notification and said, hey,
you gotta stop this.
This passcode you've used in like 160 places, and it is compromised. So you need to change your password before something happens to you, right? iCloud will scan your password and it will scan other places and say, hey, this has been compromised. You might want to change your password, right?
And that's in the same place as your keychain is on your phone. Yes. So if you go to settings and you scroll down to accounts and passwords, it'll bring up where you can either access your entire list of passwords or you can review which accounts have passwords that have been compromised.
Definitely. And so also with Keychain, right, iCloud, when you are creating new accounts and you have iCloud, let's say you're on your Mac and you're signing, your system preferences have you sign into iCloud, or you're on your phone, right, and you're signed into iCloud. When you create new accounts on platforms, whether it be apps or websites, and you're creating, let's say you put your username, iCloud will say, hey, you want us to provide you with a password, right?
Do you want to use the suggested password?
Yep. They'll give you a suggested password, which will be a very, very strong password. It will have, I believe, it's for 16 characters, and it will be definitely capital letters, lowercase letters, and numbers and symbols. So it'll generate that passcode for you and then save it in your keychain. So you don't necessarily have to know what that passcode is. You just have to remember what your Apple ID passcode is, because that's the encryption key. That's what will gain you access back to the passwords, right? As we said, if you utilize iCloud Keychain, that keychain is encrypted, and the encryption password is your password to your Apple ID account. Okay. Also, 1Password, if you're not using Apple devices, and you're not using Apple Keychain, you can utilize 1Password. 1Password is a really cool third-party application that allows you to store passwords, and the encryption key, that password is a master password that you create, right? So you create one master password, and then 1Password will save all your passwords for your other platforms underneath that one master password. So I would recommend, if you're not utilizing iCloud Keychain, I would recommend the 1Password. This is not an ad. I just think that 1Password is pretty cool. Moving on.
What's our next tip? What's tip number 4?
Tip number 4 is VPNs. VPNs. We've talked a little bit. We've talked a little bit about VPNs in the past. VPNs are virtual private networks. Okay, virtual private networks, and VPNs offer you two things. Right? They offer you security, and they offer you anonymity. Privacy. Yep. Right? So
put up that invisibility cloak.
And so the way that they make you anonymous, right? So VPNs, step back a little bit. VPNs are virtual private networks. And so the way that you utilize a VPN, there are companies like ZenMate. ZenMate is the VPN that I use personally. It's really, really cool. But there's other ones out there. There's ExpressVPN as well. You can download these. Some are free, some are paid. But basically, when you download and utilize a VPN, it encrypts your information, right? So as we were talking about before earlier, anytime you're on the internet and you want to send information to a website or receive information from a website, that information is sent through that router or through that internet company, utilizing your IP address. And your IP address is basically your identifier of who you are on the network as you're browsing around on the internet. What a VPN will do, it will mask your IP. So basically, think of yourself, if you're sitting in a coffee shop, you have a hood over your head. People can still hear you talking, but they cannot identify who you are. Okay.
So this would be something to use if you're on public Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You're sitting at a coffee shop. You're at a park that has open public Wi-Fi. You're at a library. You're at a work office that has public Wi-Fi. This is a way for you to make yourself anonymous, right, on the network. Okay. The second way that it safeguards and protects you is utilizing encryption. Okay, and the way that it utilizes encryption is that it creates a tunnel to another server. And what I mean by that, let's say I'm sitting here in the Virgin Islands and I turn on my VPN. My IP address before I turn on my VPN locates me here in St. Thomas. Once I turn on my VPN, I am now utilizing an IP address. I can set myself in New Zealand. I can set myself in Australia. I can set myself in South Africa, in Russia, in Brazil. I can utilize the servers, the computers there at those locations to relay and transmit my information as opposed to using my local IP address here. Okay, and so the way with that encryption, the way that helps me is that, you know, we go back to the metaphor of me having a hood over my head and talking. Now the words that I'm speaking are all garbled up before they get to the other side. So now you can't see me, and now you can't make out what I'm saying. And so as somebody that might need to utilize public Wi-Fi to to do school assignments, to access your student loan account, right? So if you're at UVI, let's say you're a UVI student and you go to Griffith, you sit out in Griffith to work on some documents, but you forget that you have to pay your student loan, and you're not using a VPN. You go onto the website, you start putting in your account information, your credit card information, and you don't know who else is sitting in that parking lot waiting for you to start transmitting that data over the network. Okay, and so if you utilize a VPN, you can safeguard who you are by protecting your identity, right? Because the VPN masks or changes your IP address, and the IP address is your identifying number on the network, and it also encrypts or garbles up the data that is being sent until it gets to who it actually needs to go to. Okay, and so I would definitely recommend you utilizing a VPN if you are working at home, and you're even if you're on your home private network. I would say in some cases to utilize a VPN. because you don't know who else is in the area that might be trying to attack you. A lot of people in neighborhoods all utilize the same router, right? Let's say in a subdivision of 100 houses, 90 of them are probably all using the same service provider. And so that makes it very easy for a hacker to start attacking the network where everybody has the same. Because if I can infiltrate one, then that means that I might be able to infiltrate everybody else that's using the same thing. Okay. Anything else on? Yes. We talked about identifying websites, but then also FireVault and BitLocker. Okay. FireVault and BitLocker. FireVault is a feature on Apple systems, and BitLocker is a feature on Windows-based systems that allows you to encrypt your hard drive. Okay, encrypt your hard drive. So when you
tread lightly with this one, because sometimes people really fudge this one up.
Yep.
So tell people how to use it, but also let people know where shit could go left.
Yep. Okay, so So FireVault allows you to encrypt your hard drive, basically garble up all the data that is on your hard drive until you give it the encryption key. Okay, and this encryption key is either one that you set, or if you're utilizing iCloud, it can be your Apple ID password. Okay, but if you set it yourself, it's called the master password.
Don't forget it.
And if you forget the master password, and you forget your access to iCloud for that password as well, the only way to utilize that hard drive again is to wipe it. Okay, so it is a good feature if you are apprehensive about somebody physically taking your system. Okay, this is about physical attacks, because with some computers, some old Macs, if I get my hands on it and I take out the hard drive, I can access all the data that's in that hard drive without needing a password. So if I can physically get my hands on the hard drive, all your data is compromised. But if the system is FireVaulted, if the hard drive is FireVaulted, if I take that hard drive out and plug it into a machine to try to read it, it's going to ask me for that master password. Okay, so FireVault and BitLocker. BitLocker is the same thing as FireVault. It's just used for Windows systems. If you want to utilize FireVault, it is very good if you are apprehensive about people stealing or gaining physical access to your computers or hard drives. Okay, so that's just another layer of protection that you can institute right now to protect your products if you are apprehensive about physical exploitation. Last is the digital profile check. Okay.
Is this our last tip?
That's the last tip, number 5. Okay, the digital profile check. Basically doing a check on where your security is currently. Okay, and there's a good website.
Utilizing that, if you have an iPhone or iPad, utilizing that security check that's in your password settings.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So that's what you're okay.
Yes, there's one integrated into iCloud, right? You can use that security check to check your passwords to see if they've been compromised. There also is a third-party website that you can go to that's called Have I Been Pwned, right? And what allows you to input your email address or your email address or your telephone number to see if that information has been compromised, through the breach of a company's database, right? So if a hacker was able to gain access to the company's database of clients or users, was your email address or your telephone number a part of that breach? And so you can put your email address or telephone number in there to see if it was, and if it is, then that can tell you that, hey, I might need to change the password for that account, or I might just need to not use that account anymore and start a new one, right? So that's one really good way, or two really good ways to check to see if any of your passwords have been compromised. Okay. Second is to go through the other 4 tips that we just talked about, right? Knowing how the difference between a passcode and a password, the difference between a 4-digit passcode and a 6-digit passcode, what kind of power that it provides to you, what an actual strong password is, utilizing 8 characters, 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, utilizing symbols, right? Knowing those differences, knowing how to utilize 2-factor authentication, knowing if you don't want to use a text or email as a second factor of authentication. You can utilize a third-party service like Google Authenticator, or utilize device authentication, right? You can utilize Keychain or 1Password to be able to automatically generate strong passcodes for you, as well as store your passcodes for you for easy retrieval as you're setting up new accounts or verifying accounts, right? Utilizing VPNs. So as you're out in the world and you want to protect your data as it's being transmitted, and you want to become anonymous on the network so people aren't able to track you across the internet, utilizing a VPN in today's world will be very advantageous for you, right? So going through just those four tools and concepts, if you integrate those right now, you can drastically increase the security of your activity on the internet. Okay, and then lastly, you can check, I touched on a little bit about this earlier, you can check the privacy policy of the apps and websites and services that you're using, right? You can go, if you're a huge buyer on Amazon, go to Amazon's privacy policy, see how they're using your data, if they're selling your data. Go to Facebook's privacy policy, right? See how they're utilizing Instagram, Snapchat, right? See, you can see in the App Store, you can see the entire privacy policy. It's as a little graph, a little icon graph, and it will show you what data is being used and how it's using. It is mandatory for any app on the App Store to show this information to you. Take a little bit of time and go through it so you can see how companies are utilizing this data, so you can make a better informed decision on if you want to utilize that product, and you'll be more aware of what's going on with privacy in the future to know if you want to utilize services from a company going forward. You'll know the identifiers to be able to check before you click that download button.
Or before you just hit accept. When that privacy policy pop up, don't just hit accept. Like,
and
get through it.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up the little icons in the App Store, because I know that the privacy policy, I think our privacy policy is here at the shop is like 13 pages. Right?
It's 18 pages.
Okay, 18 pages. Right? So I know it might be a little dense, so you may not have that time, but the App Store has really good just little dashboards that gives you a lot of information about how your data is being used. Okay? So just a quick recap, those 5 are
number one.
Number one, utilizing a strong password and passcode. Number 2, two-factor authentication. Number 3, utilizing a VPN. Number 4, number 4, the Keychain and one password, right? And iCloud Keychain. And then number 5, doing that digital check on yourself, going to see what accounts have been compromised and what passwords you may need to change or update.
And take action on.
For sure. That wraps up my digital citizen. You want to give us just a quick synopsis before we check out of here about Apple versus Epic? Give our listeners
actually,
just a quick update on that.
Apple and Epic gave their closing arguments already in court. So now where we're at is what is the name of the judge? Our judge's name is Judge Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers. So now she's in her chambers and she's deciding how she's gonna weigh in or settle the case. She hasn't come back with a decision as yet, so right now we're just waiting to see what she says, because whatever decision she comes back with is gonna really set the tone for how both of these companies are gonna have to navigate the environment moving forward.
And it's gonna set a precedent for how other companies are gonna have to move forward. Right,
correct.
Other gaming companies, other
Any
social
other
media
company
companies
that has its own isolated app store.
So just keep your eyes on it. We probably won't hear back from the judge
for at least another 2 weeks or so.
I think maybe a little bit longer. I don't expect to hear from them probably till late July, maybe even August. Right?
Yeah.
I was watching Mac Rumors the other day. Mac Rumors and CBS, and they were talking about it a little bit. And I don't think that we're going to hear, because all the deliberation, all the different things that they have to analyze.
There's
I
a
don't
lot
think
to
that
consider.
yeah, there's a lot to consider, and I just don't think that they're going to come to a conclusion anytime soon. I think it's going to be probably late July, or somewhere around August, right? Last is WWDC
Whoop, whoop.
2021.
For the people who aren't knees deep in technology, what is WWDC?
WWDC is the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference. Okay, so this is where all the iOS developers, Mac developers, all the developers that develop all the software for Apple products, we all come together in a conference to learn about all the new software that's coming out for the next year and all the development tools and techniques and methods that are coming out for developers to use in the upcoming year. Also, sometimes they release new hardware at these events as well. So what
It's
we
like
are
the
expecting,
cherry on the cake.
this is like Christmas in the summer for Apple fanatics like myself. So we are hoping for, we know that we're going to get iOS 15, right? iOS 15 is going to be talked about. New Mac OS.
I was just gonna ask, are we expecting a new Mac OS? Because
Yep. Well,
we're on Big Sur right now.
We're expecting it as all the last 7 years, maybe even longer. Apple every year has come out with a new operating system, so we're expecting them to keep in trend. So we want a new operating system, or we're expecting a new operating system for the Mac OS. We are expecting a new mobile operating system, iOS 15, iPad OS, Watch OS, TV OS, Car OS. All the operating systems will be updated. And as far as hardware, we're expecting the new MacBook Pros, 14-inch and 16-inch, and the new MacBook Airs. And it is rumored that these new MacBook Pros are going to come back out with the integrated ports. And
I'm so sick of this USB-C only port because I need like a full stack. I need HDMI, I need USB-C, I need standard USB, SD card slot. Like, give me the ports back.
So that's the gripe, right? The gripe is that the previous Mac models only have 4 USB-C ports, and to utilize other ports, you have to buy adapters and all these other dongles.
And each adapter is $79.
It's really ridiculous how they're monetizing that. But it's rumored that Apple has heard this feedback and that the release of these new MacBook Pros is going to provide us back with integrated ports into the computer. So
I need MagSafe to come back too, because
and
us
MagSafe,
clumsy people in the world need MagSafe.
MagSafe is slated to come back as well, in a new fashion, in a new innovative way. So I want to see how that's going to look. But yeah, we're supposed to be getting HDMI ports back, USB regular USB
3.
USB 3 and USB 4 ports, SD card slots. We're looking to get those ports back, so I'm very excited about that. I haven't updated my Mac since 2012. I purchased the first edition of the MacBook Pro Retina edition back in 2012. I spent probably about like $2,700 for it. And it's lasted me this long. So hopefully, I'm expecting this computer to set me back probably about a good $3,000. But I'm hoping that's going to last me another
10 years out of that computer.
Last me another 10 years. So, WWDC is June 7th through June 11th, and the big event is on that Monday on June 7th, and it's usually at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay.
How can the people tune in if they want to, like, the youth that want to learn about what's happening and how they can take advantage of developer tools?
Definitely. So if you want to register as an Apple developer, you can do so on Apple's website for free. The only you have to pay if you want to start distributing your app on the App Store. But if you want to download Xcode and get access to the developer tools, you can sign up for a free developer account. Especially if you're in school, you can sign up for a student account. The entire event, WWDC, used to be a in-person event, but due to COVID last year and this year is all virtual. And
that opens it up to more people.
It opens up to more
like
people
that,
because I think the on-site conference can only hold.
It was like a lottery.
It was a lottery,
you weren't
and
even
it could only
guaranteed
hold.
You got a spot.
It could only hold 5,000 people, and they wouldn't release the footage until after the event was over, right? So if you didn't attend, you had to wait a week to see all of the things.
To get access to the content.
Correct. So with it now being virtual, everything is done through video. So the entire event is going to be live streamed on Monday on Apple's website. You can live stream that on Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you aren't able to catch it at 1 p.m., let's say you're at work or you're in school, you can always check the recap on our Instagram page at Joshua the Genius. That's Genius with the J. You can always catch the recap on there. I'm going to be doing a live story as well as doing some post recaps about all the new software and hardware that's coming out of the event. Okay, Sarah, if you don't have anything else, I think we're going to close for this episode. Okay, thank you guys for joining us. I hope that some of this information is useful to you. I hope that you start implementing some of these tools and concepts into your everyday lives. Because these hackers aren't going to stop, right? Where people see, where they see opportunity to exploit, they're going to do so. So I just want you guys to be more aware of what's going on and to have some tools in your pocket to be able to utilize.
Protect yourself.
Yep, and protect yourself. Okay. We're going to be dropping some links to some documentation on all the concepts that we've talked about, and also some third-party websites
resources,
that you can use as resources. But you can always utilize us as a resource. Our website is at www.joshuathegenius.com. If you're locally here in St. Thomas, you can always come by and see us here at the shop. We're on 5333 Rodexgata. That's where Old Crazy Cow used to be, right here in Main Street. It's right across from Stonehouse Cafe, above, on the second floor, right above Valentine's Jewelers, right next door to Chico Jewelry Repair. Okay? Give us a call if you need us, 340-227-3821. And other than that, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Peace.